Hello, my name is Ben Callaway. I am sponsored by Discrafts, Iron Lion, Team Ledgestone, and Culture Shock Barbershop, and you guys are listening to Chain Clankers podcast.
You're listening to the Chain Clankers podcast with your hosts, Quentin Ferris and Horatio Gonzalez. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers.
How's it going on, everyone? Horatio here with Chain Clankers podcast with my partner, as always, Quentin. We have a really fun episode today. We're able to bring a lot of hot interviews this last few weeks, even though everyone being on tour. We're trying our best to get you guys the best content possible. Appreciate you guys listening to every episode. Leave us a review on these last few, what you guys think, what you would like to hear more of for sure. But what do we have on this episode for everyone?
Yeah, Horatio, we've got a fantastic episode. I say that every time, but I really do mean it this time. We've got a super fun show here with Ben Callaway. One of the guys who, first off, one of the best dressed on tour. Second off, one of the smoothest on tour. I mean, this guy is just a killer, and I had a great conversation with him. His disc golf journey is really, really unique. He's been playing for a long time, but just now is going on a full-time tour. You're going to want to make sure you stay tuned through the end to hear his journey and why this is the year he decided to start his tour, and just how difficult tour life is. I mean, we've said it with some other folk, but it really is a strain on a lot that you got going on at home. So he kind of dives into that a little bit, which is super fun. And then for our educational part of today's episode, we really want to work on form. It's starting to get hotter outside. You're probably doing a little bit more field work. Maybe you got some tournaments coming up, or you've already played in a couple, and you want to improve your form. This is a great episode for it, because we talk to Ben about improving form, how you can do so, and just some things to kind of watch out for and make sure you're not doing. So you're going to want to make sure you hit that subscribe button to us wherever you're listening to us from, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever. Let us know where you're listening to us from over on Instagram, or comment down below. And without further ado, I think it's time to go ahead and bring Ben on. Ben, welcome into the podcast. Super excited to have you on today's show. Like we were talking a little bit beforehand, one of the smoothest guys on tour, one of the best dressed guys on tour for sure. Ben, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, especially on a weekend when you could be out playing, to sit down with us and chat disc golf.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Hell yeah, man. Super excited to have you on. I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation today. Super excited to hear about your story, as well as maybe learn a thing or two about improving our form and be able to have those monster bombs and just looking good while we're doing it, like you were there out at Jonesboro. Before we get started, where can the people follow you at on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube? Where can people connect with you online?
Don't have a Twitter or YouTube, but you can find me on Instagram at Benjamin Callaway, DG, and on Facebook is Benjamin S. Callaway.
Sweet.
Cool.
Well, man, let's go ahead and let's get started with this interview. Where does disc golf begin for you? How long have you been playing disc golf?
So I've been playing disc golf for about 13 years now. I actually got into disc golf pretty late. I first heard about it when I was 18 years old. I didn't join the PDGA until I was about 20. But yeah, I started playing around 18, 19 years old. A buddy of mine just, much like a lot of disc golfers, a buddy of mine just said, "Hey, you want to go and play disc golf?" And I looked at him with a, kind of a weird face, like, "What's disc golf?" And he, sure enough, drugged me out there, gave me a few discs, and I fell in love pretty much after the first day.
So you said you're from Iowa, correct?
Yeah, from Iowa.
So what's kind of like the scene in Iowa when you started playing? What's that like?
So the scene in Iowa when I first started playing disc golf was it's still pretty big. The amount of people that we have, it's actually kind of like a diamond in the rough, really. The courses we have are spectacular, but we just haven't really been able to hit that mainstream pro tour level yet. But if it ever hits Midwest, though, people are going to be pretty surprised at how wonderful it is. A lot of the disc golfers that I play with are, pretty top notch. When I came into the scene, we had Chris Sprague, Adam Olson, Tanner Duncan, Mike Robinson, a lot of old guard names that a lot of kids today probably don't know about, but these are the guys that I looked up to playing, so I learned a lot from them. But as far as the courses go, we have abundance. We have woods, we have open, lots of technical, lots of pretty techy lines, especially over in C2, Camden 2, Chris Sprague's course that he designed. And it was kind of a bit of a learning curve for sure when I first started playing. Because I, like you guys said, I'd like to just throw bombs as far as I possibly can. And learning how to try to throw more techie lines in the woods was definitely a learning curve for sure, to say the least. But yeah.
How was I mean, you just mentioned a bunch of awesome names there. Were any of those guys like really instrumental in like helping you develop as a disc golfer? Did any of them maybe take you under their wing and like kind of show you the ropes or anything like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely they did. Mike Robinson, one for sure, and probably Adam Olson had the biggest influences on me. Mike Robinson was a very big arm thrower. And you could actually even say that a lot of my form that I learned was kind of based off of his. You know, before I joined the scene in the Quad Cities area, he was known as being the guy who threw far. Like he was it. He was the guy. And then I show up and I, throw some shots and everybody kind of looks at me and goes like, who's this kid?
Yeah.
So after I, just randomly saw them out playing casually and wanted to join up, they were nice enough to just let me play with them. And he kind of, from there on, kind of like took me under his wing in a sense, like showed me what the PDGA was, how to approach tournaments, and he would drive me to tournaments as well, which was a wonderful experience. We became very good friends as well. So yeah, I would say Mike had a big influence, as well as Adam, who gave me a different perspective on what the PDGA and like what disc golf is, as far as the mentality of it. So he gave me a lot of great advice along the way. So it was a lot of a lot of learning from them for sure.
Cool. So let's rewind a little bit. So you started playing 18, you got hooked. What did those first couple of years look like, or how long was it before you started playing tournaments?
So I started playing 18, 19. I probably waited about a year before I actually started playing tournaments. And when I was 18 or 19, I had no clue what golf was. It's like I played ball golf in high school, but that didn't really work out, and I never really learned the concept of golf. So when I started playing disc golf, all I wanted to do was just throw the disc as far as I could. That's what I loved. So I would go to my local course, which is called Eastern Park. It's very wide open, and I would just take my disc golf bag full of drivers, putters, mid-range, whatever, right? Like 50 discs as much as I could. I would throw them as hard and as far as I could for hours. I didn't really care as far as like where they were landing. I wasn't really paying attention to the distances or like the lines. I just wanted to throw it as hard as far as I possibly could in any way that I could. So I'm throwing like these giant left to right Anheuser lines with these putters, just trying to push 300, 350, as far as, as I can in the beginning there. And then once I joined in the Quad City scene, that's when my buddies were like, throwing far is great, but how about we actually learn how to play golf? By the way, I couldn't putt worth anything. Putting was like not even in the ball game. It was terrible. It was literally just drive for show and putt for literally nothing.
So you were pretty much the typical new disc golf player.
I was pretty typical. Yeah, for sure. Just throwing it as hard as I can. Couldn't make a putt worth anything. And then I learned real quick that once I started playing tournaments, putting's pretty important. So I worked on that a little bit more once the tournaments started coming in.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely know this winter. I think in one of our episodes, we talked about goals and what we wanted to accomplish this winter. And one of my goals was to, I really want to make sure I putt 3 or 4 times a week. And that very quickly turned into, I want to go do field work 3 or 4 times a week and see if I can't keep pushing the distance there with the drives. So I guess like talking about this, were there any like major struggles that you had early on that maybe, caused you to kind of question whether or not you wanted to continue to do disc golf, or anything that kind of, came into your head as like, I don't know if this is for me, like anything like that?
As far as that's concerned, I never really had that thought. I definitely had thoughts where I was like, I'm probably never going to be that much better, because of the progression that I had in the beginning. Like, obviously I could throw the disc far, but if you can't putt, then there's really no point. So I thought maybe a couple times where I was like, well, maybe I won't really be that great of a disc golfer because I can't putt. But then I thought about it again. I'm like, well, I'm also not putting in the work. I'm not practicing. I'm not really actually trying to be a better putter. I'm just doing the same old thing that I was doing before. So I don't think I ever had the thought of like, this probably isn't for me. It was just mostly I probably like had a very short-term thought where like, I probably won't be that great of a player. But then that obviously didn't pan out either, because I feel like I'm a pretty good player.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say, how serious were you like in those first 2 years? I mean, you wanted to improve just to get better, or you wanted just to be a better player, or you had your eyes already kind of set on competing at a higher level?
So when I was just out throwing, I wasn't really playing any tournaments. I definitely didn't have any aspects to like wanting to be like a better a better PDGA player, I guess. But at that time, I didn't realize the PDGA was even a thing. That wasn't until pretty later on when I was actually throwing discs. Once I learned about the PDGA and that people actually do this for a living, they make money off of it, and it's something that's bigger than just your casual, let's go out and have some fun and throw some discs. Once I realized that, that's when I thought, okay, I could actually be pretty good at this then. Because growing up, any sport that I tried, if I put a lot of time and effort in, if I put my full interest, I was pretty decent at it. I was pretty good. I played a lot of sports growing up. And once I learned about the PDGA, I definitely thought, you know what, I could probably be pretty dang good at this if I actually put some time and effort forth. So once I started playing PDGA events, that's when I actually started developing more of a like routines on how to practice, how to play, and learning more information based on the people I was playing with, etc.
What sports did you play? I'm gonna go out on a limb and just guess maybe baseball was one of them. What was there anything that you
100%.
Was there anything from baseball you could take to disc golf that really helped you kind of elevate your game at all?
I guess from baseball, I mean, I stopped playing at a very early age. I stopped playing around like 9 or 10 years old. But if there was anything I could bring to it, not necessarily. I guess the swing of the bat is actually a good thing. The motion, because I would actually bat ambidextrous. I would bat right and left-handed every once in a while. So that motion of when you're pulling through with your drive, it's somewhat similar. You're generating that momentum from the ground up, and the smoother you are with your swing as opposed to your throw, the further the ball can actually go as opposed to the disc. So, but it was so long ago, I can't really think of anything else that would actually be brought back into it. To disc golf, that is.
Did you ever swim, or like swim in high school? Anything like
I
that?
didn't swim in high school. The only sport that I played that was like in school was ball golf, and I didn't do that until high school. That was my only sport that I played where I was on a team for my school, and I did that for about 2 years.
Yeah, because I feel like I know watching you and a couple other players, you guys have like you have kind of very long arms, just like wingspan wise.
Yeah.
And I feel like swimmers, like I get that vibe from them. They have like huge arms, solid core.
Yep.
And I feel like any kind of like swimmers that swim in high school competitively, if they figured out disc golf, I feel like they would also be very good at disc golf just because the way that their bodies are set up.
Sure. I don't know if you guys interviewed Ezra Adderhold, but
Yeah.
he swam. So
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a prime example right there.
Yeah, did not know that. We did interview him, did not talk about that. So I'm gonna have to hit him after this and be like, Ezra, I didn't know you were a big time swimmer, because I didn't know swimmers could be jacked like that. That's all I gotta say.
Dude, I mean, have you seen Michael Phelps when he won all those championships? Oh my!
I guess that's true.
Those gold medals. I mean, oh my
Intense.
gosh, the dude is jacked. All swimmers are jacked, by the way. Their backs are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got into this was a couple years ago at this point, but I got into a very heated debate with somebody over who was just a better raw athlete, LeBron James versus Michael Phelps. And it was, at first I was like, it's got to be LeBron. And then this gal was just like, no, it's absolutely Michael Phelps. And at that point I took the stance of, okay, if you're getting mad about this, I'm just going to argue the other side so you continue to get worked up. But I mean, hey, that's a really good point, because they are athletes. I mean, look at Ezra. He's a great disc golfer. So I guess, baseball helped a little bit. Ball golf, I imagine, helped a little bit as well, maybe just with the mentality of golf. Were there any advantages that you had by playing ball golf that has carried over into the disc golf scene?
I guess like you said, it's kind of like the mental side of it. Because it's like in ball golf, it's you yourself against the course. So transitioning over to disc golf with that mentality was definitely a lot easier, as opposed to other sports where you're on a team and it's more of a team effort. Everybody has to play to their fullest abilities in order to win. But for you, it's just however far you want to push yourself is how much you're going to take out of it. So I would agree with you on that. It's mostly the mentality side of it.
How would you say your mental game has improved or evolved over the time you've played?
Like tenfold.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I call myself a kid because I'm pretty old. But when I first started out playing, my mentality was absolutely horrendous. I would throw discs, and I've actually did an interview for the local paper like 10 years ago where I compared my mentality status to like Happy Gilmore. Just like in the very beginning, you're just throwing clubs, punching out Bob Barker, kicking kids, things like that. Maybe not to that extent, but it was pretty bad. And I would say it's pretty much almost a complete 180 now. Like I still get upset, but I mean, it's hard not to. When you throw a bad shot or miss an easy putt, or you just falter on something, it's hard to sometimes just not to get a little upset every once in a while. And I feel like that's okay. That's not that big of a deal. As long as you're in control, it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay to get upset, learn from that mistake, move on, and continue to improve. Correct. Is there anything that you've found out over the years that has improved your mentality on the course, or, maybe going from that, I'm really mad, I can't control myself. Is there something you've done to hone in that control?
Yeah, it's definitely just experience. Like you said, you learn from it, and it's definitely a lot of that. A lot of guys, there are some disc golfers out there that are pretty good at honing their mentality a lot better than others. But for most, I feel it is just experience. And it took me a long time to figure out, what, I've been in this situation before. It's just time to relax, buckle down, literally just wipe the slate and start over again on the very next hole. So that for me came with just a lot of time and effort and over the years, for sure.
And I mean, you probably enjoy the game a lot more now with, more relaxed or that mindset, as opposed to being mad all the time, because that kind of golf is not fun at all. Exactly.
It's not fun for anybody, really. It's not fun for yourself. It's not fun for the people that you're playing with. It's not fun for the spectators and everything. You're absolutely right. It is a lot more fun when you can actually, just sit down and enjoy what it is that you're doing without getting that upset.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think mentality is really important, and it can really change everything that you have going on the course. I've definitely told this story before, but I mean, one of the first tournaments I ever played in, somebody called an OB rule on me about reteeing that I didn't even know existed. And so that, I was having a pretty dang good round up until then, and then got flustered. And then the last six holes, I literally could not even come close to par if I wanted to. Was hitting first availables that I've never hit before. Couldn't make a putt inside of 8 feet. So learning that, hey, it's literally okay. I believe the first person we ever interviewed, Logan Harpool, he was like, look, it's literally just disc golf. You're out here for fun. Like, yes, it's competitive. Yes, it's important. But like, if you're not having fun, then why are you out there on the course? And so that's something that's definitely stuck with me. And I really think can help improve other people's mentality, because disc golf simply is not fun when you're not having a good time. I've definitely been there. I think we've all been there. Have you ever been somewhere where, you're out on tour and you're just not having a good time and maybe questioning whether continuing to go on, or have you always been pretty calm, cool, and collected?
Well, up until this year, this is my first year on like full-time tour. I was always a weekend warrior, so I never really had those thoughts because I would always go home after. But I mean, I can say honestly that there was a time this year, actually, like being away from my family, my wife and daughter. There was a time when it actually could have been during Waco, because I don't think I ended up cashing at Waco. That was a pretty rough stretch there, but it was pretty hard being away and then having to go back to where I was staying, and not being able to talk to my wife or my daughter like in person, getting a hug. That was pretty hard. That may have been like the only time where I was like, I really wish I was just home right now. I don't even want to be out here. But obviously, it's a pretty low point. I didn't cash at Waco, which is like the first time I've cashed in like 4 or 5 years or something like that. So, but that's pretty much the only time. Before that, I never really had those thoughts. I've always enjoyed being at disc golf tournaments, and it's just something that is so much fun for me. I love being out on the road. Love being able to see all my friends.
So what gave you that push, to go on tour full time this year?
My work ethic, probably, and the support that I have from my sponsors and all my friends and family back home. For years, a lot of people have said, if you ever actually decided to go on tour, I feel like you would do pretty well. And for the longest time, I kept putting it off, mostly because I didn't think that there was any money in it. I didn't like the idea of being on the road and like having to basically, like, if you don't cash or if you don't make enough, like you're not eating next week kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, when I first started playing, that's what it felt like. That was the mentality. And I asked quite a few touring pros, like, how do you guys do it? Like, how is it that you guys are on tour full time? This is back in like 2010, 11. I was like, how do you guys do it? How do you guys get, like, how do you make yourselves go out on full time and support yourselves? And the only answer I ever got was, it was pretty much the same, was just do it. Just go out and do it, bro. I'm like, okay, but like, how do you do it? And then for the longest time, that stuck with me, and it just kind of manifested into like, touring full time just doesn't seem like a good idea. It seems kind of silly. And then, ironically enough, just this past week at Jonesboro, I was talking with my team captain, Mr. Paul Ulibarri, and I asked him that same question. I told him that same story I just did about, like, these pros told me that they just go out and do it. And he goes, well, he's like, yeah, that actually makes sense, because the reason why they mean just go out and do it is because you're going to go out and do it. You're not going to like die or anything. You're going to survive. You're a human, like you're going to find a way.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to go out, you're going to find a way, and you're just going to make it happen. Because otherwise what happens? You go home?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? He's like, I'm like, oh, yeah, where were you, 10 years ago? That would have been some great advice. But in this recent year, it was a lot of my work ethic, my family, and all my friends that I had the support from, that made me want to try to go out and do this full time. Because if I didn't do it now, I would regret it later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So those are the biggest reasons why I decided to go on tour full time this year.
How do you do that with a family? Let's talk about that a little bit, because, just like you, I'm sure there's a ton of phenomenal players out there who don't tour full time, but they could be competing, just like you are now, but they have a family or other reasons, so they haven't done it or they won't do it. So just how do you do that with a family?
It takes a lot of sacrifice, a lot of trust. For me, my wife is everything. If she wasn't in my life, this wouldn't even be a possibility. But we planned for this for like pretty much ever since COVID. Because I actually lost my job due to COVID. I was laid off. I worked a construction job, and a lot of jobs were not really starting to be available. So we started planning from then all the way until next year about me wanting to go full time. And a lot of that was how often I was going to be able to come back home. Well, so like right now, obviously I could go and play a tournament, but I decided to come back home every chance that I get, just so that way it's easier on my family.
Yeah.
So I go out for, a few weeks, and then I come back for a week, maybe two, depending on what the schedule looks like. And so far it's been working out really well. Me and my wife are doing really well with that. She's holding the fort down back at home, which is wonderful. But I can also say that it is definitely hard. It was not an easy decision. The night that I was supposed to leave for Las Vegas, I almost didn't, because of how hard it was to leave my wife and daughter back home, and I'm going out on this journey, being away from them for the next 5 weeks. It was extremely hard. But I'm glad that I did it, and we're both glad that I did it, because it's starting to work out pretty well so far.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Do you think you'll continue to do it going into next year as well?
We'll see how the rest of the year goes.
Yeah.
We'll see how the rest of the year goes for sure. This is definitely the test run. So if it goes well, if I hit the marks if I hit my goals that I had set out for myself for this year, chances are you'll probably see me on next year again.
That's awesome, and just talking about that, going back home every chance you get, I feel like that probably, keeps you motivated. I feel like if you went out on tour just full time and stayed out, you might get a little bit comfortable, a little bit discouraged, but probably going home every chance you get, seeing your daughter, seeing your family, and having to leave them every single time, it probably, lights that fire under you. It's like, okay, if I'm going out to do this, I'm going to do it 100%. So you're getting that reset button every time. And I feel like that helps you out a ton on tour.
You couldn't be more correct on that, because, after Texas States, I drove straight home, which is like about a 14 hour drive. I drove straight home right as soon as the tournament was over. And then my next tournament right after that was Jonesboro. So, and, my first 3 tournaments of the year, they were okay. They weren't great. Like I said, I didn't cash at Waco, and I was just feeling pretty bad about myself as far as like my play. And then sure enough, like you say, I go back home, I recharge my batteries, I get to see my family, and next thing you know, I shoot, the second hot round at Jonesboro first round, and wind up on second round lead coverage.
Yeah, which was an incredible tournament. And I do want to talk just a little bit about that Jonesboro experience for you. First off, let's start with, how was it, you mentioned earlier, being on Jomez a little bit, for first round coverage, but this time really earning your spot, second round lead card. What was that experience like for you?
It was wonderful. The guys that I played with weren't strangers by any means. I played with them at tournaments before in years past. So playing with them wasn't really like, oh my gosh, I'm playing with Ricky, Calvin, and Drew. I played with them all before. I've been playing for 13 years, so I played with pretty much almost everybody. But the stage was definitely new to me for sure, and I would be lying if I said that the nerves didn't get to me a little bit. because obviously I knew what my game plan was, but I had never had to execute it on that level yet. So, but I loved every second of it. I mean, I love crowds. So being able to see all the spectators again was just wonderful. And then being on coverage as well was also just a wonderful experience. And then to top everything off, I had that throw in on hole 5 for birdie, which was so stellar, so sick. I was like, okay, I did it. I did my thing. I came here what I had to do. I came, I made Gomez. I threw a disc in, and then sure enough, that made like its #1 highlight on their top 10 highlights for the weekend. But overall, it was awesome. It was wonderful. I couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, and those are the moments that remind you why you got hooked with disc golf in the first place. Those kind of throw-ins are just crazy stuff like that. Like that's what makes it fun.
You just never know. Like that's you're right. It's wonderful in that regard because you never know. Like my first shot wasn't all that great, but my next shot could be spectacular. So you just never know.
Yeah, and I think my favorite part of the whole throw-in was your reaction. It was genuinely priceless. That just that just went in. Wow, that's awesome. That's so cool. Just like the calm reaction, like wow, I can't believe that just happened. I loved it. I thought that was so pure.
Yeah, I would be lying as well if I said that I didn't think I was going to make it, because like that was my play on that hole pretty much all weekend long, was just lay up, because the wind was not really. I didn't like the wind for that shot for me, so my play was just to lay up and then just put it close, take my par, walk away. But then when I saw Ricky's throw, I got a great read on the wind, and I was like, if I threw that disc like maybe 10 feet left on the same line, it might go in. And sure enough, I throw it, and I'm like, that's a good chance. And then Ricky, you can hear Ricky in the background, like, oh my God, it's in. It's in. Oh, look at that. It went in. I was like, yay.
That's awesome.
It was great.
That's one of my favorite things about watching coverage or just disc golf in general is how excited the other players get when someone else does well. That's one thing about disc golf that you don't see in a lot of other sports.
For sure. That can, I mean, the camaraderie alone was pretty stellar. I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but I try to pride myself on that. Like, I feel like I can bring that kind of energy to a card. I'm not really afraid to just say like, hey, that was a really good shot. I don't care if you're beating me by 1 stroke or 12 strokes. I like to give credit where credit's due. So I like to bring a positive energy when I come to a card, for sure. And that card was just so much fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was really fun. I think that the whole Jonesboro experience was really, really cool. But something I do want to talk about while we still have you here is I want to discuss how we can get better at having that good form, throwing those bombs, right? So what is maybe, I mean, this is an overall question, but like, how do you throw bombs, right? So like, what is something that you're looking for? If you were watching somebody throw, what are you looking for in their footwork or in their form that's really critical to increasing their distance?
Well, I mean, power is generated from the ground up, and it's also, if you want to throw extremely far, smooth as far. So one thing that I learned was that, like, the slower I started with my run up, and the more powerful and explosive I was in the end, like the further I was actually being able to throw. Like, a lot of guys think that they have to have like this really long run up and like 6 or 7 steps, and then they have to throw the disc as hard as they possibly can, which sometimes that does work for some. But if you have a small and smooth and compact form at run up as well, and an explosive follow through, chances are you can have a good success of throwing a little bit further. Now, obviously, there's a lot more detail that needs to go into that, but that's something that needs to be done, with one-on-one. It's really difficult to just kind of explain that just right here on the podcast. But definitely good footwork, and then being slower in your run up, and then really focusing on the explosiveness at the end to really drive that disc forward.
How hard would you say, throw? I know that's a difficult question, and we hear about people saying, I throw 80% power, 100% power, rarely. Just in your, how would you describe how hard you're throwing now compared to when you started?
When I first started, I was definitely throwing the disc as hard as I possibly could all the time. So it was just as hard, flat, straight. Like there was no shape shopping with when I was younger. Nowadays, it's definitely more of just depends on the hole, what the shot needs for it, how disc selection on how hard I need to throw it. Like that's the thing that's when golf comes in right there. So for instance, on hole 1 at Jonesboro, you see a lot of guys, they were throwing high-speed drivers and destroyers, forces, D1s and all that. I was actually throwing an undertaker because I felt more comfortable throwing a slower disc and then just giving it a lot of angle and throwing it a lot harder rather than trying to force over my overstable disc and then hoping that it would skip up to the basket. Because the issue for me there is if I throw it hard, I feel like I'd go long. Yeah. So I have to club down to make sure that I actually gauge that distance right.
So what I'm hearing is it's a lot more about disc selection, clubbing up, clubbing down, instead of hey, I'm going to throw this overstable force at 50%. Yeah,
I mean, it can be. For me, yeah, I like to incorporate a lot of disc selection. Yeah, I mean, I could just throw the exact same disc on every single hole, and that would, that could be easier for some people. But for me, I feel like it's easier just to select the correct disc and then just throw that.
It's pretty interesting because we see other players who have a ton of power. One that comes to mind is Eagle. You'll see him a lot struggle. Everybody wants power, everybody wants distance when starting out. You have Eagle who has an insane amount of distance he can throw, and a lot of these shots I feel like he struggles with the distance because they're too short. He has to power down so much. On some shots he'll have to throw just an insane hyzer just to be able to get that shorter distance, but he's still able to figure it out every hole.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there for sure. For someone else, the distance driver that he would be throwing, for them, that's the perfect distance. That's their full flight. I'm gonna park this hole. But for him, if he were to throw that full flight, he'd go 50, 60 long. So now he's got to club down and try to figure out, okay, now I need to throw this much angle with this amount of speed, this much power, just to make sure that it gets there. Yeah, it's a thing now. It's weird to even think about that actually. Back in the day, it's just throw it as hard as you can. You're not gonna reach it. Don't worry about it. Nowadays, it's maybe you should club down a disc or two.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like you constantly, especially on the live coverage, you hear them saying we have to make courses more difficult because they're too easy now. But really, it's one of those things where you see the top throwers in the game. Yeah, sure, they're able to park that 500-foot hole, 400-foot hole, whatever it is. But some people, it genuinely takes everything they got in order to get there. So I think that's really interesting. Something else that I think that I would like to learn a little bit more about is you mentioned it just prior about being smooth and then at the very end being explosive. So what does that explosiveness look like? And how do you, I know an issue is muscling on the disc. How do you know you're being explosive versus muscling on a disc, if that makes sense?
Muscling on a disc as opposed to being explosive. Well, one thing that I think I've noticed about people who are muscling on a disc when they're very stiff when they're throwing, and they typically look like they're rounding. Okay. They're basically just kind of like throwing their arm out in front of them and just trying to throw that disc as hard as they can. as opposed to someone like me who, I mean, yeah, I mean, I work out and everything, but, next to a guy that's, like 6'3", 200 pounds, I look pretty small. As opposed to me, I make it look as if the disc is basically on like the end of a whip and my arm is the whip. And I'm just snapping it through across my body and releasing at the end. But yeah, for people who are muscling it, yeah, I would say it's what I've noticed is they typically try to just kind of round their arm and just throw the disc as hard as they possibly can. And typically it's usually on a lot of anhyzer as well, because, obviously that's the only way they can get the disc to go anywhere. Because if they try to smooth it, good luck with that.
Yeah. Another little tidbit, I don't talk about, or we haven't talked about much is, everyone talks about grips, but how tight would you say you're holding the disc, when you're going? Like, I think a couple people I've gone to play with and they struggle, or they really yank the discs, hard right or something like that. They're like trying to grip the disc as hard as they possibly can. But I feel like there's a middle ground. How would you say or describe how you're holding the disc as far as tightness?
It is, my grip is just tight enough to not be able to have it ripped out of my hands, but loose enough that I'm not like putting a dimple in it. So it's like you said, it's a good medium for sure. I don't know if like a lot of other players do this, but like my power grip is a little bit different than others. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but when I'm powering a disc, my index finger, which is my pointer finger, and my pinky, the tips are actually facing on the rim. So, and then my middle finger and my ring finger are tucked. So I know that sounds like I don't have a disc here, unfortunately, but so basically you can see my fingernails on my index finger and my pinky, and you won't be able to see my fingernails on my middle finger and my ring finger. And it's kind of like a modified power grip. So it gives me my control that I would like to have, but it also gives me the grip and the power that I also want to be able to generate on the Frisbee. Because a lot of players, they throw with the fan grip, and or they just throw with just the power grip. So I kind of developed something that's kind of in between to help be able to throw with both.
So almost like a Texas Longhorns kind of thing, or
yeah, in a sense,
something like that, a little bit.
Yeah, in a sense, and then just imagine that being gripped around the rim of a Frisbee.
Okay, cool. I like it. I guess another question that I have is, when you're trying to throw really far, you just mentioned it a little bit earlier, people will typically round if they're muscling a little bit too hard. Is there any other kind of telltale way to know you're rounding, and maybe a quick fix for rounding?
A quick fix for rounding. One thing that I like to try to do is I take out the towel, the typical towel. You get out and you try to snap that thing. But I try to focus when I'm practicing. I try to focus really hard on making sure that like my hand is coming straight across my chest. Okay, like when you're rounding, it's pretty typical. Your hips can open up a little too early, and then your arm is coming around, and then, like I said before, if you are rounding, typically the disc will come out on anhyzer. And if you're throwing smooth and with correct form, and the disc is coming and you're throwing across your chest, that disc will usually come out just on hyzer, maybe a little flat, and then just drive forward on a straiter line. But I like to take the towel, and I really like to focus on bringing my arm across my chest and then snapping at the end to like literally snapping the towel, so it makes that sound, like that sound. But again, it's definitely something where it'd be a lot easier for me to be able to show rather than try to actually explain it on here. I'm not the greatest at that, but I'm trying.
I think you're doing a great job.
Well, I appreciate that.
How much would you say you're focusing on, arching your back or standing up straight? I've heard some different players, they say they stand up straight. Some of them, Calvin Heimberg, he kind of like bends over his disc quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's a player that likes to throw, full power, kind of hyzer flip kind of stuff, or very overstable and get it to straighten out. So he has that where he rounds his body over the disc, but then you have some players who stand up straight. Where would you say you're at with that?
I think it just depends on the shot that I'm trying to throw. Typically, I feel like my back is, I guess, slightly arched a little bit, pretty much on almost any throw. But that's just comfortability and balance to have over the disc. But obviously, if I want to try to throw more of a hyzer, like a big spiking hyzer, I'm probably gonna lean over my disc a little bit more, so that way I can generate that power to be able to throw it straight up and down. And then obviously, if I'm trying to throw more of an anhyzer look, I'm going to probably stand more, upward in my stance, so that way I can get my arm to come across my body and create that angle that I'm trying to throw in the field. But typically, I wouldn't say I focus on it that much, because when you've been playing as long as I have, it's just natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes you can think about it a little too much, but typically in those situations, you're probably pinched in a spot where you shouldn't have thrown the disc in the first place. Now you're thinking, oh God, what do I have to do to get out of this? And so you start thinking of things you don't normally try. So
nice. Well, Horatio, do you have anything else, or you think we're ready for the ace round?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
All right. Well, hey, let's get to the box and let's start this ace round. This is the same 5 questions that we'd like to ask everyone we interview, just to see how their answers differ. And maybe we'll hear some really fun stories along the way. Horatio, you are first up on the tee, so why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Okay. So you're taking out a buddy to play they've played around disc golf. They're hooked. Maybe they've gone a couple of times. They want their own set. That way they can stop using yours and maybe losing them. So what, 3-disc putter, mid, driver would you recommend to them?
I would give them a D Roach, probably an ESP Buzz, and a Big Z Undertaker.
I like those. Those are good. You said which Roach was it? The Pro D plastic Roach?
The Pro D, the Pro D Roach.
Nice. I haven't tried that one. I think I've only tried the Jawbreaker Roach, and I was a pretty big fan of it. Definitely something I'd look to.
The Jawbreaker Roach is good for sure. But what I like about the D Roach is that it tends to beat in a little bit quicker, so it'll teach you how to throw different angles with it. So it may fly one way, one day, but a couple weeks later it'll fly different, and it'll force you how to throw more angles with it.
Nice. Our second question we got for you is, what is the favorite course you have played and one course you would love to play?
Ooh, favorite course I have played. Obviously Winthrop USDGC. That's a wonderful course. I love playing it. One course that I want to play is the Beast in Finland. I want to go to Europe so bad, and I would love to play the Beast. It's on my list. So hopefully, fingers crossed, one day.
Yeah. All right, next question. Number 1 tip you would give to yourself just starting out in your disc golf journey?
Calm down. It's okay. It's okay to mess up. It's not that big of a deal. So I would definitely tell myself to just calm down, take a breath. It's okay. Move on.
Nice. Our fourth question we've got for you, what is your favorite memory playing disc golf?
Favorite memory playing disc golf would probably have to be winning the 2011 U.S. Amateurs. That's definitely that's one that hits home for me, because it was something that I sought myself out to do. Like I told myself I was going to win it the year before, following year, went in, said I was going to win it, did it, ended up getting a sponsorship from Discrafts. So that's that awesome. One for sure.
Awesome. All right, last question we have. What is the biggest mistake you see new players make?
That's a tough one. Biggest mistake new players making. Possibly not asking enough questions at their local pro, from their local pros, maybe. Because normally I would say it's form and technique, but there's just so much out there nowadays. Like when I first started playing, there was nothing. But nowadays they have this vast amount of information and video to be able to like critique their form and all this. But you don't really get to ask the questions to those pros that are putting out that content unless you have somebody at home. So I mean, I would say if you want to learn more about whatever it might be in disc golf world, talk to your local pros. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's okay. Like most of the time, they're probably going to say whatever it is that you're asking. Like, yeah, just go ask. It's okay.
And that was a great segue, Ben. You set me up completely to tell everyone to subscribe to this podcast, because this is literally exactly what we're doing, right? We're able to sit down with Ben and other guys and gals and ask them questions. If you guys ever have a question, hit us up on Instagram or Twitter at Chain Clankers so we can ask your question to other pros. If you're uncomfortable going to pros, continue to listen to this podcast. If you are comfortable going to pros, continue to listen to this podcast. You might learn something you weren't even trying to learn, and now you got a little bit better at disc golf. Ben, we highly appreciate you coming on, highly appreciate your time. We know you're a busy guy and you're at home. We want to get you back out to your family, so we definitely appreciate you stopping by on the podcast. One more time, where can everyone follow you at, and any shout outs to any sponsors you want to give or any thanks, go ahead and do it now.
Yeah, so yeah, you can follow me at Instagram, Benjamin Callaway DG. If you want to hit me up on Facebook, it's Benjamin S. Callaway. Thanks again for you guys for hosting me. Thank you again so much. I'd also like to thank my sponsors, Discrafts, Ironline Disc Golf Supply, Team Ledgestone, and Culture Shop Barbershop for supporting me on the road while I'm out here. I just can't thank you guys enough for having me on.
Yeah, hey man, thank you for the time and good luck. We'd love to see you on more coverage, wish you nothing but the best. And by the way, super cool being sponsored by a barbershop. Like that's pretty legit.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It definitely has a lot of perks to it for sure.
But cool, man. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Chain Clankers podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers, and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us from so you never miss another episode.